Greetings and salutations. It's your man CD, the fallen angel Christopher Daniels, and I'm currently at home in Southern California enjoying Southern California things. And one of the things out in Southern California that you can enjoy is the Circle of Debate podcast. They're out here in Southern California giving you guys quality entertainment to listen to. So give them a listen. Tell them Christopher Daniels sent you. Enjoy the show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Circle of the Debate podcast. I'm the host, the previous one, Ivan C, alongside with the great American hero, Mike Lopez. And today we do have a special, honorable guest. He is, you name him, he's a man. He is a producer, he is a writer, he's an on-air talent. He is the president and CEO of the United Wrestling Network and Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. That is Mr. David Marquez. How are you, Mr. Marquez?
I'm great, Ivan. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you very much for joining us. Obviously, you saw the previous interview we had with Mr. Rosas, your heavyweight world champion. So I wanted to actually get to have the audience get to know you more personally. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with the question. So how did it begin for Mr. Marquez to get involved in professional wrestling? How did it all start?
Well, it's been a long time now, 30 years. It really started for me. First and foremost, I think a lot of people are going to be shocked by this. I'm not a wrestling fan.
Okay.
I didn't necessarily grow up a wrestling fan. I watched it. It was on TV. My friends watched it. My thing was my grandparents, they were involved with the concessions at the Olympic Auditorium when I was a kid. So I was down there a lot. And I saw what was going on and realized early on that it was a show. My interest as a kid was being an animator. I wanted to make cartoons. I wanted to work for Disney. I mean, I still write with like Blackwing pencils, like just because it's what I know. There's a light table behind me. There's a bunch of other animation artifacts around the house too.
Oh,
so
okay.
that's always been my first love. How it's just interesting as getting ready to graduate high school and all of that, computers started to come into animation, and I had never even seen a computer. only in the movies or in the Jetsons. I didn't have computers. Had a Selectorite, typewriter. So it really discouraged me from continuing animation because I thought that you didn't have to know how to draw to be in animation. And the thing that really pushed it over for me, there was a special on TV. I think it may have been the Jetsons movie, ironically enough. And Bill and Joe, Joe Barbera and Bill Hanna were in this piece. I think it was on Turner because Turner owned Hanna-Barbera towards the end of their lives, at least, and they still do. But they were involved like as ambassadors, and they called them producers and stuff. They really weren't involved, but they used them. They were showing what was left of the animation cells and painting on cells, and incorporating that into computerized background. And here I saw these like late 80-year-old, 90-year-old men talking about computers. And I was like, shit, how am I going to, how do these guys know about it? And I know nothing about it. So anyways, that really discouraged me from doing that. And early on, when I was 18, 19 years old, I really got into television. And I lied to get a job. I saw in a broadcast cable magazine on a newsstand somewhere that this TV station in Springfield, Missouri was looking for a studio technician, and I had zero experience, and I told a white lie and got hired. And it was the first and last time that I told like a white lie like that, because I showed up in Springfield as this kid who knew absolutely nothing about the job. And luckily enough, the man who hired me didn't kill me. he kept me on, but I didn't keep that job. I got a bigger reduced rate. They put me in the master control, and I learned how to make television pretty quickly, moving from master control, then to being a camera operator for the news, and then other special events in sports, and then I got into directing. And 2 Emmy Awards later, I'm here. But when it comes to wrestling, the year Bob Costas left NBC, the station I was at, the time came back to the local. And so people were just blurting out things. What can we do at that time? It was after David Letterman, I think. And, you know, monster movie show, or this or that or whatever. And I just blurted out, well, how about doing a studio wrestling show? Which I, again, had really bits and pieces of ideas of how this thing works and goes together. And the general manager, ironically enough, said yes. And so I had to rush to figure out how to put a studio TV show together. And with the news set over here and an interview set over there, and then put the ring, and then try not to show and use all that stuff. And it was a great time. But it was a learning experience like no other, because being in Missouri, and I'm from LA, being in Missouri, you know, I was always looked at as the crazy guy, like with the ideas and this, and like people there, they get up, they go to work, they talk about the snow or the fact that they didn't ice the freeways, they didn't salt the freeways, you know, that's like, that was the conversation. And I was coming from this Disney mentality of like, well, let's do this. And how come the parade has to look like that? Can't we do the parade looking like this? Can't we put reporters down there? We don't have technology for that. Well, can't we make it? Like, they were doing this stuff in the 30s. How come we can't do it in the 90s? Like, this makes no sense to me.
Right.
And so I got that moniker put on me pretty early. We did the studio show. I hired Harley Race as the booker and Gordon Solie as the announcer. And it became World Legion Wrestling, and it still exists today in Missouri as World League Wrestling. Yeah. And I sold out to Harley and BJ Race about 1998, and came back to California and went to UPW and back to Disney. But in between in Missouri, I was producing things with WCW and WWF and Memphis Wrestling and stuff in Oklahoma and all over the place. So it was kind of the very last tail end of territories, if you want to call it that. Right. Very heavily involved in the NWA. I became an NWA owner at that time, probably about 1997. Yeah, so that's how I got involved. That's how I'm here.
Not bad.
I pulled the short straw.
I'm curious to know that, because you mentioned that you didn't necessarily grow up with it, but what were some of the things that you did, the glimpses that you did manage to catch growing up from wrestling?
Well, I mean, the things that grabbed me were the characters and the personalities. So growing up in LA, of course, Freddie Blassie was a big star here. Most people across the country in the early 80s saw him more as a manager on WWF TV, but I knew him as, you know, Freddie Blassie, the King of Men, and his sombrero, and being on Channel 34 here in town, what was left of the LA territory out of the Olympic Auditorium. Yeah. So they would shoot that show either there at the Olympic or Channel 13, KCOP. But then it wasn't shown on KCOP, it was shown on KMEX, which was all kinds of confusing, but and the show was in English on a Spanish channel. But I really started seeing when I was there live how the production worked. You know, they didn't have IFB earpieces like we have now. At the Olympic, the corner post, you know, sometimes there were lights for rounds for boxing. Yeah. So, but the camera was pushed in a little more, and so they would flash, and so that meant to go home. That was their signal. Or there's a guy ringside in the headset who was acting as a timekeeper. You may have heard about the pencil, and you know, the guy would just lift the pencil, and that means go ahead and end the match. But I saw early on how they produced very efficiently these television shows, and it stuck with me. So from Roddy Piper being in LA to and watching them go off to WWF and Hall of Fames and everything else. You know, that's what really, I think, grabbed my attention. It wasn't the violence. It wasn't the outrageousness necessarily. It really was the personality, the character. So all those guys at that time. And then, of course, when we got WWF on TV here, I think the first time I remember watching it was on, it's a KCAL now, but when I was a kid, it was KHJ 9 and KDOC, ironically enough. So that's where it was on TV. And then later it went on Channel 34 too. Yeah, so when I started seeing Superstars of Wrestling, or even WWF Championship Wrestling when it first went on the air, or All American Wrestling even before that with Vince, I started seeing how the guys were being used from LA, other areas, when they'd come here and then they'd go there, and they were completely different. The characters were different. It was a little more outrageous and a little fun. But I wasn't the kid that like wanted all the toys right away, or even a little older for that. Or any of that stuff. It was real for the most part. It felt real, even if it was zany. And going back into animation, it's virtually the same thing when you're, trying to convince an audience that a drawing has emotion, and you're really sketching that and putting those lines in, how thick those lines are in certain areas, and creases of the eyes, or the expressions around the nose, or how the hair is whipping around in animation. It's kind of the same thing that I took from those early days of selling on television, which doesn't exist much anymore, in the character and personality of a talent. So I really believe, when you saw Andre the Giant back then, it was like, whoa, this is spectacular. This thing that they're calling the eighth wonder of the world, especially 1982, 83, 84 Andre. He was a sight to see, and I did see him at the Olympic, and then later at the Sports Arena, and then later at WTBS when he did the 25th anniversary with Turner. Being there, seeing that, it was really cool to, you watch this whole evolution. He's older than, he's on crutches, he's in the movies, Princess Bride and all that, and that's what really I took to, because again, in animation, you have your favorite animators and they can do certain things. And once you know who they are and their names, and I'm not going to go through all that now, but the same thing with voice actors. Well, difference between Mel Blanc and a Dawes Butler, or a Paul Frees, a June Foray, or whatever. You get that mental image the moment you hear the voice. So whether Mel Blanc's doing the Kool-Aid Man, or he's doing Bugs Bunny, or he's doing Barney Rubble, or thousands in between, you still get that piece, that dialect, the inflection that that it's Mel Blanc. So that's kind of like with the territories, when you started realizing through magazines at first, because we didn't get all the TVs here, but really reading the magazines and letting your imagination get mopped up in Bill Apter's words, and in the photographs and whatnot. And then you have to imagine, like, boy, Austin Idol and this guy, and he's Jerry Lawler, and he's bleeding like that. And why is Tommy Rich the NWA world champion? How did that happen? Because I didn't necessarily have, satellite or cable back then, and we didn't get WTBS. So it was all done in magazines, and you just had to use your imagination.
That's definitely, absolutely. And especially, how you said, like, the emotions and the storytelling of the character that gets, obviously, the audience involved, and that's how it develops, and it gets, get more audience to be more intrigued, especially with it. So in regards to when you began in Missouri, Springfield, Missouri, with Studio Pro Wrestling, during that time, how was your first experience working with, what talents did you begin to work with at that time? And how was the interaction for the first time as you were, working with the talent up in Missouri before you came back to California?
It was that whole area, the Midwest and the South, it's completely different. When I left LA, it was still pro wrestling. It was still the idea of territorial wrestling. It was still presented as wrestling. Going to Missouri, it was like life. These people were country people. They'd open their mouth and cornbread would just fall out. Like, it were just blah, like just wrestling. And it was an experience because leaving Metro LA and being in, you know, in the middle of movies and the mecca of all that here, going there to these bumpkin towns, and legitimately when you hear people say all you had to do was put wrestling on the marquee or a sign out and people would show up, it really was that. It didn't matter the quality of talent that was on the program. You know, today, you know, people will say, "Oh, this whole show was botched," or "This is a horrible show," or "It's a backyard show," or "It's a garbage show," or "It's a this." There was tons of that, but then the best part about it, Ric Flair was on top.
Yes.
And the rest of the card was shit, and no one would know that because you weren't there. And there was tons of that, mind you. So I worked with everybody during that time period coming in. Again, luckily, Gordon Solie and Harley Race were gods in that area. And so with them endorsing me, and in the beginning, they didn't want to, but them endorsing me really helped me get to the next spot. So talents that you know about now on TV that came out of that time period, there's a lot of them, but the biggest ones, I feel, John Cone, the referee on WWE, he started with me at World Legion Wrestling. Trevor Murdoch started with me back then. And there's Tim Storm, his first TV matches were with me back then, and stuff like that. So there's you meet so many people as you're going through down those highways, and those drives were long, and so you had to make friends. So if I was doing a WCW Saturday night, or if I was doing a Memphis show, or if I was doing something in Oklahoma, you know, you had to really draw out that map and where you're going and understand the map. But because of Harley and Gordon, I was allowed to do these other things with these other companies and see how it's done. But working with, I mean, everybody, I don't think there's a name that was alive during that time that I didn't work with, because that's just how it was. So if we were doing a third-party show, a WWF third-party show at a high school in Bell, Missouri, when they ran St. Louis on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, you know, on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we can certainly get those talents. And the same thing goes for WCW. We can get those people. So that's how I really cut my teeth being a promoter, doing those types of shows and working with those types of people.
That's awesome.
We've seen on the WWE network shows like Storytime, where they integrate an animation aspect. Have you ever thought about bringing something like that to your promotion involving animation?
I would love to do something like that. The problem is that I have no time. There's barely enough time to sleep a little bit. I'm such an idiot for creating another damn show that we have to do, and this one is live every week for 90 minutes versus the taped programming. But yeah, man, it's would I like that? I would love to do that. There's just no time. We have just enough time to get that show out every Tuesday, not to mention the Hollywood program that goes out to 300 stations across the country. Then we have the Arizona show that we've just been recycling because we can't shoot there right now. We're getting ready to shoot it here in LA though, or in California. And that goes out to about 40 TV stations every week. So, and then the New Japan Strong show we produce. So, you know, we put out 4 programs every week, right out of this house. So, so there's no sleeping here, man. There's actually there's nothing here. We're lucky to have life. Everything is zombie land for sure on Albert Street and Sherman Oaks.
There you go. When you came back from Missouri, when you came back to Los Angeles, how did Championship Wrestling begin? How did you're the creator of it, so how did you begin with that promotion?
Well, the Hollywood thing came later. My first assignment when I came back here was I just needed a job, and I didn't think I was going to end up in wrestling, to be honest with you. I thought I was going to go into TV or something. Early on, when I first started too, I was a tour guide at Disneyland, And I knew people there, so I called quickly to get a job, and so I was hired back as a tour guide. So I had a part-time job just to have some money.
Yeah.
And then while I was out in Orange County so much, Terry Taylor, who was a great friend of mine, told me about UPW and that they had a WWF developmental, and that they needed someone to produce their TV and videos and packages and stuff that on guys that are in development. So I got that job. And so I would go and work on Main Street USA during the day, and then drive over to the Galaxy Theater at night all week long, and we would edit and shoot, or it would be the oh boy, I forgot the name of it. What's the name of that place we were at in Huntington Beach? We were at a gym in Huntington Beach where it was kind of like the school too. Mm-hmm. But we would shoot stuff there. Like a lot of people who work with me now, they all talk about the Ultimate Pro Wrestling home video series of how to wrestle, and I produced that.
I see that. Yeah,
it's pretty funny to hear that in retrospect. It's like, oh yeah, I was 7 years old and I got those VHSs, and now here I am, 22, 23, and actually in the ring with you. So it's my fault. So anyhow, so that's where that started. And as UPW started its climb, it was also its decline. It was kind of doing both at the same time, which is very interesting. Yeah. You know, we get great people in, and then they'd be signed to the WWF, and they'd be gone right away. And we did a couple of anniversary shows, I think, at the Grove of Anaheim, which were very good. Vince McMahon even appeared on one. And then at that time, I was hired by Kevin Kleinrock to be the director of XPW TV, which was not my bag. To me, I was like, it was just so bad that that style of wrestling, hardcore wrestling, extreme wrestling, whatever you want to call it, man, that was not my world. So I totally didn't. I was so square in that circle. And then the porn stuff on top of it, to get paid for wrestling, you had to edit porn, you had to do all this stuff, and I was like, what the fuck am I doing? This is fucking stupid. Yeah. So, you know, Kevin is a damn good friend of mine to this day, a very close friend. I love Kevin. But he knew how I felt back then. He knew everything. But I did a couple of the Olympic Auditorium shows, and then the weekly TV show, I directed that couple of episodes, and then Shane Douglas came in as the booker, and then that was the end of me. From there, Gary Yap pulled me out of whatever I was doing, and I started producing the Epic Pro Wrestling TV show that aired on KJLA for a while. And then he's the guy who actually who put me on camera as a host, and it was Larry Rivera and I. And we did a studio show at the Glendale Studios here in Glendale, California, where Hollywood would also shoot there later on. So I went and did that, and that didn't last. And then during that same time, I became the vice president of New Japan Pro Wrestling out of the blue. So Simon Inoki hired me, and I ran the LA dojo, and I was recruiting and shooting TV and shooting video and shooting all this stuff. And I want to say 90% of the guys that went through there that I invited, I dare say discovered, but I invited and helped come in. They're big shots now, every one of them. Yeah. So I'm very proud of all those guys and my association with them. And then out of that, the New Japan has always tried to make a advancement in America. They've always wanted to be here. They've always wanted to do something and be seen just like the WWF, WWE, Impact, whoever the top, AEW, whoever the top guys are. Mm-hmm. And just because this is America and all of our faults, the Japanese are never allowed to this day to be on that level. Television networks, TV stations across the country, sponsors, it's still 1941 to some people. So it's very difficult. Very unfortunate. So that's why they're on the internet. The thing they had with Axis was great with Mark Cuban, but now that the Impact parent company has an Anthem, they have their own agenda. So it doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So I did that, and that I was trying to convince the Tokyo office that I can get New Japan on TV, but we had to go a different route, and that route was back with the NWA. So I started a thing, NWA Pro Wrestling, and it was out of Santa Monica. And the New Japan office and Mr. Inoki and those guys wanted nothing to do with the NWA, even though we were associated with TNA at the time. They wanted nothing to do with it. So I went, all right. And I cooked up a show that I did at the Orleans Arena in Las Vegas. And we shot it for TV as a pilot. And we had, I think, about 6,900 people there. Looked fantastic. And I paid for everything, not New Japan. And the reason I did it in Vegas was because we had a license to promote. Inoki had one from his UFO days and promoting that kind of stuff. So he had a promoter's license, and I used it. So anyways, we did the show, and it was a huge success. But the New Japan people wanted nothing to do with it, and they were kind of moving forward in their own direction and something else they wanted to not whatever. And at the time, the management and I didn't get along, so I left. And I went ahead and I produced a thing. Well, and then we did Wrestling Society X in there somewhere. I don't remember where that happened. But we did that. Another show that I hate. It was horrible production. Everybody else you'll talk to will say, it's the greatest thing ever. It was, fuck that. It was bullshit. The whole thing was bullshit.
I'm agreeing with you 100% on that. I wasn't a big fan of it.
I'm not talking about what aired on TV, just the whole process. It's
for me, the concept, honestly, yeah. For me, just the concept and the way how it was, just that. As a fan, I wasn't really, I wasn't intrigued, so. Well, the same with XPW. I wasn't intrigued.
So we did that. Either. Yeah, I mean, the original concept of XPW or Wrestling Society X was way different than what actually aired. It was supposed to be called Black Label Society Wrestling. That was the original name of it. And I think Zach Wilde was originally the host, and that's why the bands were incorporated and MTV and all that stuff. That's how Kevin in Houston got that thing sold. But then MTV got their finger in Viacom. They messed with it, and we couldn't do certain things. And there were lists of stuff we could do and what we couldn't do, and piranhas and not piranhas, and electrifying people, and all this stuff. So anyhow, we did that. But we came up with this concept, and actually Kevin Kleinrock was a big part of Championship Wrestling from Hollywood in the very beginning. Because we were putting out a bunch of DVDs through Big Vision at the time, and while we were doing this and we did that Cold Blood or Cold Day in Hell for XPW. It was an anniversary show, which was very well done. It was actually done in 4K way back then. We were testing new cameras and technology, and then when we brought the footage back, we couldn't play it back because we didn't own anything that played back 4K or any of that stuff. But that went into the Hollywood stuff. And the first time we did it, and the truth is, the only reason I did it was because the NWA membership at the time told me that no one would put local wrestling back on TV. And I was like, huh. And these are people in Tennessee and Virginia and like small markets where you could get local wrestling on TV, and there was no money in it, and there was this. And I was like, huh. Well, I'm in LA. If there's any place to fail, why not fail in, Entertainment Town? So I went out with Kevin and Houston Curtis, and we had a meeting with KTLA, and they had a brand new general manager at the time. And we put the whole thing together. And originally, this was going to be a co-production with Tribune Broadcasting. And that's why we went ahead and did it. We didn't have a contract. It was a handshake. And they had just... were sold. Tribune Broadcasting was sold to I think the guy's name was Sam Zeal. He was a real estate person, not a broadcasting person. So he was looking at the real estate assets to Tribune across the country. That includes the Cubs and WGN and probably about 80 TV stations across the country, and the newspaper, the Tribune, and that. So it was a big media buy too. But they wanted a bankruptcy right when we finished shooting the first couple of hours of the Hollywood show. And we put it together, took it to KTLA, and they told me they couldn't do anything with it because they were in bankruptcy. The only thing they were going to do was the red carpet shows with Sam Rubens, and they were going to do the Rose Parade. That's it, with local production. So I was stuck with these tapes, which had great people on it. Daniel Bryan was on it. Tons and tons, and when you watch those, Brent Albright was battling Adam Pearce for the NWA World Title with Blue Demon and all this other stuff. So I had that.
That's awesome.
And I needed a place to put them and get some money back out of it because we spent an awful lot of money on this stuff. But we shot it at CBS Columbia Square Studios on Sunset Boulevard. At any rate, we did the show, and I had nowhere to show it. And then I just, on a whim, made a call to KDOC. And they had a new general manager at the time too, and he took a chance on us because SmackDown was leaving Channel 13 here, or your My Network, UPN, or whatever it was called at that point across the country. And he felt that there was a place to grab a wrestling audience. And I tried telling him, "This isn't that. you're not getting SmackDown. This is not that show."
Right.
But at any rate, so we went on the air. And now we've been on KDOC and 300 other stations across the country for 10 years.
10 years,
so,
wow.
Yeah, so
and
now I'm getting
moving.
and it's funny, being in my pushing 50, it's kind of funny now that I meet people who are probably 25 to pushing 30 themselves. They're like, "I grew up watching you on TV." And I'm like, "Shut the fuck up. There's no way you grew up watching me on TV." But it's true.
Right here.
See?
But we're not mid 30s, so we're not early 20s. No, we're not mid 30s. So, we grew up with watching the Territory days and what it is now. So.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
No, I remember flipping channels and coming across XPW and Wrestling Society X. Those are like major throwbacks for me, hearing those names again, So, for you, because I remember seeing that and, after probably watching SmackDown and then tuning into those, obviously there was a difference, right? How did you guys go into production knowing that there's this giant company, WWF? How did you guys try to differ yourselves from SmackDown?
Well, it wasn't that hard. When you have 2.5 cameras and maybe one light, you look way different. I mean, I was taught to make pro wrestling, and whether it's in an arena or and coming out of news and local television, you kind of learn things, some tricks of how to make things look bigger or better than they really are. And that's what's really taken us all this time, is that knowledge. Like if you're ever in the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland or the Pirates of the Caribbean, when they flip those lights up, it ain't that magical. It's it's a lot of ugly faces with some really bad paint jobs, but when they put the effects light on it, all that stuff makes sense. But when you see that in person, man, that's like, wow, I paid $160 for this. It's like, it's not all that, guys. Yeah. So same thing with us in broadcasting. I knew how to make a football game look good with 3 or 4 cameras. I knew how to make a baseball game good. I knew how to do a newscast. And I know how to just be professional on TV and professional in general, and just being a good person, I guess. That all kind of comes into it. And the same thing with the people we hire. I do my best, absolute best, to hire real good people.
Did you attend school for this?
No, I've never been to college ever. Never set foot I've never even walked into a college classroom. It's interesting. Like, I'm not going to tell people that, they made a mistake going to college or they're paying off debt or whatever they're doing right now. It's just that I feel that you have an aptitude for something. You have that. No one taught me to draw, and no one, and I don't think anyone can teach you to draw. You know, you have to have that instinct. You're either a writer or a musician. You can learn to play the piano. You can learn to play an instrument, but you're just pecking at it, and you know that it's not fluent, and you're not going to necessarily write a big composition because that's not in you. When I hear about people like my age going back to school and they just want to do something, that's one thing because you're bored. But if you're not going to slice open bodies, or you're not going to build buildings, or you're not going to do something scientific or legal, I'm not sure if school is there for you. If you weren't a bossy kid, and I wasn't a bossy kid, I was very shy and quiet, but I still had a big imagination, and I spoke with a pencil. So that's how I got my stuff out. And I was directing characters in paper and doing that. But if you're not like directing your family and your friends, you stand there, I'm going to be here, and a camera's going to do this and say this, you're not going to be a movie maker. You're just not. If you didn't have that instinct in you, you're not going to write that symphony. You're not going to write that song. You're not going to write a novel, because that's not in you.
Right.
Period.
Agreed. 100%.
It's funny. I used to see people like I had to take a ceramics class in school as part of art.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a kid, and I was the worst at it. Like that's not my world. I didn't want to sit there and do this stuff and this stuff. I was like, what the fuck is this? Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
But the things that I was interested in, like I was a horrible math student. Oh my God, math was the worst for me. I can't think like that. I am a very non-linear thinking person. So when you have linear things like mathematic problems or scientific problems where you have to go through it linearly, it kills me. But when it's let's put something together and let's build something, I can do that all day.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, guilty as charged when it comes to mathematics. I still deal with it with this day with my with my job that I do. I work in the auto finance industry. I've been doing it for 15 years. So yeah, it's a mind boggle every fucking day to deal with mathematics every day.
Oh yeah,
it's a pain in the ass, but it pays the bills.
I still have to do it. I still have to do it. There's still algebra and wrestling and shooting, and the ring is this way, and we have to put this lens here, and this lens has this type of aspect ratio, and then we have to get the pictures into the truck, and how many yards of cable is that? How many boosters do you put on that? And then there's fiber optics within that, and then you have so many lines of communication within that fiber optics. Then you have to take that, send it to space, and pray that the next people can pull it out of space and then send it to people's homes.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not fun.
No. So when you began championship wrestling, you started in Glendale. How did it become about when you moved the location to Port Hueneme up in Ocean View?
Well, we started it we started on Hollywood or Sunset Boulevard, and then we went to the Galaxy Theater in Orange County. And those first episodes are what really aired on KDOC. We shot there for about, I think, 2 or 3 months. And then I got tired of driving from Sherman Oaks all the way to Santa Ana, even though it's funny, that ended up being my job because I worked at KDOC for a while as their head of production. So I was driving down there anyways. But we went there, and then I heard about Glendale. But before Glendale, I found a spot on La Brea Avenue in Melrose, catty corner to Pink's Hot Dogs.
Okay.
And there's a movie theater there, and it's called the Showcase Theater. Yes. And for a year, we shot the show out of that movie theater.
Really? Okay.
It was virtually empty, abandoned, and I made a deal. I don't know how I did this, but I met this girl who was the manager, and she was like, yeah, I guess you can, if you want to do something in there, it's gonna be a little difficult because of those seats. I said, don't worry about the seats. I'll take the seats out. And which was the worst thing I could have said because it was hell getting those things in and out of there. We created a space for the ring, and those movie seats or those theater seats are put in, and screws come out of the ground. So all the screws are there, and and so you have these screws sticking up.
Oh no!
Which the guys had to perform on top of, mind you. They really did. We put carpet over everything and some padding, but there were these things sticking up. But we shot the show there for a long time, but a year. Then there, in between going to Glendale, there's a little tiny spot called the Solar Studios, which was virtually a barn. And if you see the footage in the wide shots, you'll see it's a barn. It just is, it's a barn. And then we went to Glendale. And we were in Glendale for a year or two. And then after that, the owners of the Ocean View Pavilion wanted to bring more notoriety to their theater. And so I got the call and went out there and met all those guys. And we've been there ever since. We've been there for 8 years.
Definitely. It's funny that I used to live in Port Hueneme, right? It's not even that far from the pavilion. I used to live on Hueneme Road and Ann Street. I was living there 05 to mid-07. But I mean, wow, I mean, how close it was. I'm like, wow. So I didn't even know. I did not even know, you know, because when I was living out there, I was more going just to, you know, school purposes and work. So it was just like, you know, back and forth. Never actually explored around Port Hueneme.
Yeah.
Definitely. So who actually, when you got into more involved in obviously when you got involved with pro wrestling, see more, and like obviously you start your own, you began your own promotion. Who was more of your mentor, you know, throughout as you were learning from the beginning, and who was mentoring you? Whose brains did you pick? Like, you know, take their ideas and mix it up, make your own, and like who? Well, you know, how did that, you know, how did your ideas became, you know, evolved? Was it because of your previous mentors you worked alongside with, like Gordon Solie, Harley Race, or, you know, anybody that you know, I mean, in mind that you actually idolized because of their creativity, and then you took it upon yourself and then, you know, created.
A lot of what I do, believe it or not, comes from Walt and Roy Disney. It doesn't necessarily come from wrestling.
Okay.
It's to me, since I was a kid, you know, I'm a Puerto Rican kid and I grew up in the same hood neighborhoods as everybody else in LA.
Yeah.
But growing up, you know, Walt wasn't gone, dead so much when I was a kid. He died in 66. I was in the early 70s. So he was still on TV, in color. So I, you know, to me, he was alive. And when he'd go on television and talk about the inanimate, or this is Disneyland goes to the World's Fair, or holiday time at Disneyland, or any of these type shows, you know, he always took you behind the scenes of how this stuff was made.
Yeah.
And so whether he's playing with the animatronic Jose from the Tiki Room, or he's you know, you're watching Peggy Lee write the songs for Lady and the Tramp, and then they go into the animation process and they're actually animating the stuff. It was always mind-boggling to me how all of this worked. And then on top of that, how television worked and how the signals go from a television, you know, they shoot this, it goes to a TV station, the TV station shoots it in the air, it goes through the air, then it comes to your house. And like that was my curiosity as a child. But him and his brother, Roy Disney, it's just an amazing story. Here are these two guys, again, ironically enough, from Marceline, Missouri, who Walt was not the smartest guy. He understood people. That's the one great thing that I feel his great strength is he understood people and the enjoyment of all people. And that has always just been in my head and ever since a kid. But his brother was the business side, and you'll hear these stories about Walt would come up with something and his brother would figure out how to pay for it. They were very successful, but they were broke throughout most of Walt Disney's life. Like, a lot of people don't realize that. Yeah, there were cartoons, and yeah, there were movies, and yeah, there was television, but it wasn't until probably 63, 64, going in the Mary Poppins years, that they were Disney. Like, people would look at Disney like, yeah, it's the guy who makes those cartoons, and yeah, he has that park or whatever. Yeah, he's on TV. But the idea of how these two brothers built this company and kept all these people together, and it's the exact same thing that goes into my world today. I don't work with my family directly like that necessarily, but we have some family involved. But I surround myself with people that I nurture and that are close. I've had people who have been with me for 15, 20 years who are still here and who work on the broadcast each and every week. So those techniques, and the people that worked for Walt and Roy Disney, in reading about them and how their movies were made and how their television was made and how cartoons were made and how Disneyland and Walt Disney World were made. And then working there and seeing that firsthand and experiencing it and feeling the emotion from the public when they come into Disneyland, or because when we were kids, at least I was a kid, Disneyland was special. You just didn't go like you go today. There were no annual passes necessarily. There were no discounted tickets. That was maybe you went on your birthday, or maybe you went at Christmas once every other year or every third year. Yeah. It wasn't a mall like it is today where you can just walk in and go shopping and go eating. The ticket books were a novel approach how to get people to ride rides. But even at times when I was a kid, we would just pay the admission to go through the door, and you didn't get tickets unless you bought ticket books like a carnival to ride the attractions. Yeah. So you can just walk around, but you had to pay to get in. Stuff like that. So that type of philosophy, their philosophy, is what's really in my head most days. From the wrestling side, of course, Harley Race was really a mentor for sure. In broadcasting, a man by the name of Bob Carroll, he, from high school, he got me introduced into television and broadcasting. And he actually worked on the first few episodes on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood as a video engineer. And then he passed away about maybe 8 or 9 years ago. But Terry Taylor's a great mentor. Jerry Jarrett, I learned a lot from him over the years of working with them. Just about everyone I've ever worked with, I've taken something away with, good and bad. You know, what to do during a production, what not to do. I had a little stint for about 1.5 years working for Nicolas Cage. I made movies with him, Saturn Films. I learned an awful lot there. I learned an awful lot about Hollywood and how the town works and how the business works. So, you know, I've never looked at wrestling as like, oh, you know, indie wrestling, let's go put on a show, whatever. Right. No, to me, there was always a purpose behind it and a business model. And we've been able to hit most of our goals for sure. Some years it was very successful. Some years flat out nothing on the back end. But teaching people, nurturing people, and getting them out into the public and going to a WWE. You know, Adam Pearce I've known since the 90s. And not only was he our world champion, but he was a producer on our show, the head writer on our show. And his talent and abilities prove now every Friday night as the WWE official on camera on SmackDown. Yep. You know, so it's just amazing to think about what we've done in probably since about 1996 to today. It's all in front of you. You can change a channel, and this might sound a little selfish, but there's a little bit of me every time you flip a channel and put on a wrestling show, all the way to Scorpio Sky, Peter Avalon, yep. Brandon Cutler, yep. Whoever, you know, even the Young Bucks. They might not give me credit for it, but even them, which you know, they were on our television too once upon a time.
Yes, I do remember that. Yeah.
So at any rate, I've had a real good career in doing this. My dog is bothering me.
It's okay.
So I'm giving him a treat to shut him up. But yeah, so we've had a lot of fun, a whole lot of fun.
Definitely. And you continue to have a lot of fun. I love everything what you're doing now, and especially, you know, now that you have the relationship back again with NWA, and now you got more involved now, you know, having United Network, and then also having, you know, on Fight TV. So it's really growing. And And honestly, like I feel, and which I believe you have what you have done is brought, especially because it's now, for me, this, teaches everyone, different opinion. But it's now almost like if it's coming back to the territory days, and what was missing here in SoCal was that, professional wrestling. And, you yourself bringing it back is what we need in SoCal, because it was dried out. And then right now with the global pandemic, I know it was really, really difficult, for you to start recording tape piece because of the whole procedures, CDC and so much. But I'm really glad that you guys are back on again and putting a hell of a show for everyone, and especially here for our SoCal natives. And because of your promotion as well, you really exposed a lot of talent who is now, wow, up into the big promotions, like from Jake Atlas, from everybody that you mentioned are now in the worldwide promotion.
Now, everything you just brought up is true. And it hasn't been a positive ride all these years being back here. So many resisted what we've tried doing all these years, because they had their way of doing it and what they wanted to do, not what needed to happen. And as I pressed forward, bullishly pressed forward, I didn't stop. I was a semi, and I was wrecking through everything. No one was going to stop what I knew needed to happen. But there are so many promotions that are around that will tell you that I don't know what I'm doing. They'll tell you that I don't know how to create talent. They'll tell you that what we do is not popular. Whether it's out of jealousy or just lack of education, I don't know. But I hear more about how bad of a guy I am daily than what positive that we do for pro wrestling and entertainment. So it's a big juggling act to stay sane and not go off on people more than I do, because trust me, on social media I'm not quiet.
I know. I know.
I tell people exactly what I feel and how I feel, and they don't like that. So,
I love it.
And like with talent, I'm doing everything I can right now to bring an influx of good talent into the area, so that when we are allowed to bring people back in, there'll be something there for them, and there'll actually be a remnants of some sort of business. So as much as people like to talk about PWG or a bar wrestling or AWS or any of this other stuff, as critically successful that is, financially it's not.
No.
Those shows do not do amazing things. And even our program, like I said, there are days, weeks, months, years that it does fantastic. Then there's times where it doesn't do anything. Like right now, we are in a slump with advertising. We're on 300 TV stations. This Tuesday show we're doing now, Primetime Live, is very expensive. It is not an inexpensive program. It is very, very expensive every week. And we're doing everything we can to recoup that money. But we know people don't have money right now, too. So we're asking them to do something that they may not have the means for. So, the project might not stick around that long. So we're doing everything we can to make things happen. I'm just fortunate enough to have enough relationships with companies from around the world that will work with us. So, like as an example, without going too far, the United Wrestling Network World Championship Tournament that's coming up.
Yes,
we're going to announce the participants on Tuesday on Primetime Live. But it will feature people from New Japan. It will feature people from AEW. It will feature people from the NWA. It will feature people from MLW. So there is no show on television right now, I dare you to look for, that has all those promotions all working together on the same show. None at all.
And that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of your promotion, that you're open doors to every promotion, and like it's kind of bringing back like the old territory days, but open doors, obviously working together, and that's the beauty of it, especially here in SoCal. I mean, that's like everybody, like other pro wrestlers that I've talked to and have spoken about doing a union. So I don't know your thoughts about them, trying to create a union, and for promoters to do a union. I don't. It's for me. It's kind of I don't. I need a better explanation.
Yeah, I'm all for organizing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for it. But I will put money on the fact that no one will agree on anything.
Mm-hmm.
The protocols that will go into play, the state getting involved, government getting involved, all that, no one wants that. And this is, I do, but most people will not want that at all.
No.
And then you have to agree on rates. And then when you get into a situation where a guy who, what's wrong, why this won't work is as much as I want it to work, and why it won't work. We have no accreditation. We have no policies or anything in place that says that you are an accredited professional wrestler and a starting fee is this and it's capped at this or whatever the relationship is. Right. Even when you're making a low budget movie that can be SAG, there used to be a thing called the low budget modified scale SAG movie, where the biggest stars, so The Rock, if he wanted to agree to be in my movie and I'm only offering him $200 or $300 a day based on SAG scale, he can be in that picture. But if you have a guy or a girl who's just a female that's just starting, and I don't think you're going to get people who've been around 20 years to agree that that person deserves $250, $300 for their match, even though they're doing the exact same work.
Right.
Popularity, experience, all that stuff. It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Because Vince McMahon said this to me himself once. He said, you're still a part of the NWA. I said, yeah. He goes, you guys can't order a cup of coffee together.
Yeah.
And he's 100% correct.
Yeah. Wow.
With the current state of things, maybe not unionized and whatnot, but we've seen talent, like for example, Thunder Rosa go to AEW. She's the NWA Women's Champion, and she's been on Primetime. So how do you feel about the companies working together more closely? We've had it on our podcast, the discussion of, maybe one promoter might book a champion a certain way, and it might not be what the promoter from where he came from, not to their liking. How do you kind of go about it? Because, you say you have people from everywhere, how do you go about keeping all the promotions happy and with booking and, stuff like that?
It's very difficult to keep anybody happy. So that's just the truth. Even if you're friendly with them, it's very difficult to keep everybody happy. Yeah. We do our best at just creating relationships and opportunities. Let me let this dog out. Hang on, I'm going to keep talking.
No.
This is like the weatherman walking over to the wall. So yeah, you just try to work with people who are good to work with, and you're not going to have an issue with them. They're usually real simplistic solutions to people's concerns when you're trying to put something together. So you just always be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Do what you say you're going to do. And if someone's upset at you, it's usually on their end, ego, whatever. But as long as you've done the best you can and you've delivered everything you said you're going to deliver, I can still wake up and look at myself in the morning.
Yep, definitely.
Yep. Well said.
Well, very well said. Yeah, because we had the discussion before, like how, especially promoters, to work with each other, it's very difficult. Like how you said, what Ben told you, like, have you ever sit down and have a cup of coffee with them? It's very true. I mean, that's why it's going to take a long time, in my opinion. I'm not sure how your thoughts about it as well. That it will take a while for the promotions to come together and work together and actually have a mutual agreement that both sides are satisfied. But I think a lot of ego. Obviously, ego is the number one in play, but it will take a while to see that. But I'm glad that, like I said, at least from your standpoints, where you're, with Championship Wrestling, you're opening those doors, and you're the first, promotion to have them, mixing it up from different promotions, from big ones, from AEW, MLW, New Japan, and that's awesome about it. And hopefully that other promoters sees that and takes, take that as an admiration of what you're doing, especially, and for them to try to develop that type of, chemistry with other promotions in the future. And that's really,
I
really
hope
great.
so, man. I really hope so. That I've had nothing but an open door for over 25 years. And again, people get upset. People move on. You decide you don't want to work with people. And we've had all of that in these 10 years of Hollywood, for sure. And then some.
Yeah.
People who I consider my family, even though they're not working with me anymore, and for whatever reason we're not speaking, it's unfortunate, but it happens, and all you have to do is love them from afar and cheer them on and hope that they get what they're looking for.
Definitely.
And for a lot of those people, the door is wide open. But all I try to do is not live fancy and treat people the best way I can. And, they can disagree with me. So at the end of the day, people like saying this to me all the time. It's like, so, you're dead, and what do you want people to know about you, or what are you going to leave behind, or what legacy, or any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, all that I care about, see, this is the truth. All that I care about is that no one, at the end of the day, no one can say I treated them bad. They may not like what I've done. They may not like the decision that we've done from a show business perspective on the program and booking and the gimmick or whatever. Mm-hmm. But no one will ever say I treated them bad. We never made people show up. We never twisted an arm and said, you have to work for us. People showed up on their own accord, and they've left on their own, and some people were asked to leave. But, for the most part, everything has been cordial as far as I'm concerned, and professional.
And that's beautiful. That's beautiful right there that you have. And, when, that talent's future, when they move on, they can go ahead and say, well, this is my credentials where I came from. And obviously you did not have a bad mouth, leaving, your promotion. That's the beauty of it. Now, speaking about, excuse me, on-air talent, that's yourself. Did you ever actually try to, step into the ring yourself before? Have you ever tried?
No.
I don't know.
No. There's no. No.
Not even as a Mr. McMahon sort of role.
Sort of like a Mr. Vinny.
Fuck no. No.
Never had
man.
the desire.
No. Even on camera, doing what I do, I didn't even want to do that. The behind-the-scenes story of, if you watch Primetime Live recently, where I did the world title announcement,
yes,
that was pulling teeth. I didn't want to do it. I don't even want to do the interviews in the back. Because I don't want the show to be about me.
Yeah.
And I have so many people around us on the show. Like even Fred Rosser, the first thing he said was, "Dave, you're the first guy that booked me out." That's not why people are tuning in. So yeah. I really don't want that piece. The reason I have to do it is because people expect it now. And if I'm not on the show, I hear from this from reporters and fans. Hey, are you all right? You know, why weren't you on the TV show this week? Or how come you're not on Hollywood anymore? Like, I had to take a step back for several reasons. One, there is so much going on at the shows. And I don't know if you guys know this. It's not like it's a secret. I've had 2 strokes.
Oh, yeah.
So I have a short memory thing. So there's sometimes I have a stack of cards here on my desk where it's nothing but taking notes all day to remind myself what needs to happen.
Yeah.
Stuff that's happened a long time ago, I can remember fantastic, but short-term stuff, little conversations, hey, pick up milk, whatever, I'll forget that. So on the Hollywood show, this was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, when I'm on camera, I was also directing the show. So I would go out of the booth, get in the ring or stand whatever, do the promo, and I would forget what it was about because I was also thinking about the production. How come that camera's over there? That light seems a little hot, stuff like that. So that's when I kind of ducked out, brought in Grant Pachoco, brought in Kathy Kelly, and a few others. Johnny LaQuasto moved from being interviewer with me. He and I did it together so that there were more people and there was more variety and I didn't have to be in every shot. And then people would read about my name on the internet with the NWA or Jeff Jarrett and I being in a lawsuit or whatever. I didn't want the real world to come into the show. Yeah. And now I have a difficult time still remembering things, even if it's my show. You know, NWA Power was murder for me. I couldn't remember. One, it wasn't my show, so I didn't know everything that was going on. I had producers in my ear and telling me, say this, say that, say this, while we're live on TV or shooting, and it was difficult. It was very difficult, and some fans even got on my case about holding cards in the ring, doing the ring announcing. I had never been a ring announcer before, ever. How am I supposed to know someone's from wherever the fuck Kentucky? Like,
yeah,
and worried about everything else too.
Yeah,
and my own stuff. So yeah, so I didn't want to do it, and on the show when I announced the title tournament, I'm trying to keep up with the teleprompter. I don't know if people realize that or not, but I was reading a prompter, so that wasn't off the top of my head. I wrote it, but
but you had to read it yourself, yeah.
But I had to do that all by myself, and it's very, very difficult for me to be on camera sometimes. And I have a little bit of Bell's palsy still. Sometimes you'll see this side of my face kind of droop, and it's difficult. So it's not that I don't want to look like Frankenstein on TV. It's just that there's other things to do that I know would be better if I was putting my attention towards that than being on camera. But I'm pretty good at it. So when it works, most things are one take. I'll give you a secret. The me on doing the announcement, that was pre-taped. That was taped at about 3:00 that afternoon. And I was directing at that time. So I was in the control room pressing buttons while that was playing back. So that's the only way it could happen. Yeah. And I was looking to try to get someone else to make that announcement and not me. And we called people. But it just didn't happen. Called Kurt Angle, called a couple people.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to seeing that 8-man tournament. I'm pretty sure the audiences are also looking forward for that. So don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, tune in on Fight TV coming up next week. Make sure you order that pay-per-view for United Wrestling Network. As well, you catch, obviously, Championship from Wrestling Hollywood on Primetime TV as well every week. And we appreciate you, Mr. Marquez, for joining us. I know we took a long, I don't know how long this interview has been, but I appreciate you.
Yeah,
I love it. I love this. I love just hearing you out, and I'm just so happy that you brought wrestling back to Southern California. And
well, thank you.
Say thank you. It's a fan because I'm a fan of your promotion. I'm a fan of your work as well. This is the first time that I hear a promoter yourself that your creativity, your concept comes from from Walt Disney, and that's awesome. And that's that's a great mindset of, to have it that way. That's really awesome. I haven't personally, I have not heard a person, creativity came from something else. So that's it's new to me. So I love it.
I mean, a lot of things. Politics push me. If I were to have gone to school, I think I would have been a history major, a U.S. history major, because that's the basis of all the stories. You have to have something powerful behind it that makes sense in order to push forward. In today's world, and this will probably get me in trouble for saying this, you have to play on racism. You have to play on people's emotions. You have to play with all of that stuff in order to do something. I believe everybody in real life has their way of living, and they should have it, and it shouldn't go into your neighbor's house or the government get involved. None of that stuff. Everyone should live the way they want to live. Yeah. But in order to incite certain emotion, you have to do certain things. And it's so interesting to me that in wrestling, you can't do that anymore. But on Broadway or in motion pictures or in mainstream drama or comedic television, you can still play with those tones. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why.
I'm with you that 100%.
I don't know why the characters, because they're all characters. Mm-hmm. Ray Rosas is not his real name. Johnny Yuma is not his real name. And when you're playing a character, you should be able to go out and play it without making a pitch and it comes back to you from the crew like, maybe. It's like, no. That's not you. Schwarzenegger isn't killing people. Right. That's a movie. It's make-believe.
Right.
So that's right now one of my big pieces with wrestling that I'm trying to grasp. A lot of people got upset at me for defending Jim Cornette, who is a friend of mine and has been for many years. I'll continue to defend him because he did nothing wrong.
No, he didn't. He's very outspoken and he has the right to.
He did nothing wrong. Yeah, but he's not only have the right to, he did nothing wrong.
Exactly.
Today's public took what he said, twisted it, and made it to what they want to do. I'm a Bernie Sanders guy. I think everyone should have everything and a little bit more.
Yes.
So that's where I come from. But when you were talking about programming, if you're in Los Angeles, it's late, but Saturday nights after Eyewitness News, 1 a.m. on KDOC, you can watch us. You can, of course, watch us on demand on Fight. The show is in English and Spanish in a lot of markets. So if you want to watch the show in Spanish, it's pretty fun. Primetime Live is also in Spanish, and yes, it's on Fight. But if you're older watching this, or you're not comfortable watching things on your computer, we are on television. You can watch you can watch Primetime Live on DirecTV pay-per-view or in demand, just like you would watch WrestleMania. So it's all there and it's all for you, and I appreciate everybody who supports what we're doing. It's been a fun project.
Definitely, and hopefully it keeps on growing and continuing, because us as fans, we love it, and once this global pandemic is over and once things get back to normal, definitely we'll be there front row. So I'm looking forward.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward.
Well, we're working on a thing because we're in Long Beach. We're not in Los Angeles. We're in the city of Long Beach.
Okay.
So we're talking to them about how we can put a limited audience in there for this world title tournament so that there's some people. We're going to see. I've been very lucky, very, very lucky. We haven't had a COVID outbreak like other promotions have had. We've not had anybody positive on our programming. We follow everything that everybody is telling us to follow. Everyone has to be tested, and if they're coming off an airplane, we have doctors there standing by to administer tests. So we're not playing around with this. And right now the hard part is allowing the public, what you can't control, in there. And so that's the discrepancy. It's a 50-50 conversation right now.
Definitely, yeah. It's tough, but we'll see. Hopefully, let's cross our fingers. Well, once again, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Again, this is a great promoter, great person. I'm out of words. You know, I can say a lot of positive things. The list can go on and on and on. From David Marquez.
I'm sure you can find a few negative too.
I think we're humans. You know, we all have negatives and positives. You know, but no, we're not gonna say.
Well, I try not to put myself up on that pedestal. It's just that, you know, the world's already confusing enough. Yeah. Individuals are confusing enough. I'm just like anybody else. Like, I have a trans nephew now that I'm trying to understand the process and his feelings and, you know, all of that. And then things on top of that and on top of that and on top of that. So I'm just like anybody else. I don't live fancy. I just live and try my best in presenting decent stuff that people like.
Definitely. That's right. You heard it. Well, once again, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.